used to do your job, I had two transport ministers, whatever the title was at the back in the day, and I asked both of them because listeners had been in touch and asked me to ask the question, how much of our road fund licence goes back into maintaining the roads? And both ministers told me over a period of a number of years that all the money that is raised by road fund licence and more goes into repairing the roads, so effectively we all had no reason to complain about it. But that's only half the story, because if you consider that the motorist is probably the most taxed member of the Manx community, we are taxed on everything that we do as motorists. So I'm interested to find out what the total tax take is from the motorist and make sure that we're being given a fair deal.
So would you expect that 100% of this goes back into the roads?
Road fund licence, definitely, but not the rest of it, no. I think all of us realise that Treasury have got an incredibly difficult job to do, that they've got to raise money on the one hand through taxes, and they've got to decide where to spend it best on the other hand. And no, it shouldn't all go back on the roads, but depending on what the figures are, I think that most of us would probably agree that a little bit more of it went on to road maintenance.
So do you think that there does need to be more done road maintenance-wise? Does the strategy work currently?
No, it doesn't work at the moment because I don't think we do spend enough money on the roads. And this is something that came upon the doorsteps during my election campaign. It was one of the things that the majority of people that I spoke to on the doorstep were outraged about the state of our roads. And I don't know. I mean, I've got some sympathy with them because quite a lot of times roads are fixed and they're fixed in a very shoddy way. I mean, that happened recently where I live at Mount Murray. A road was fixed. A big pothole or a series of potholes were fixed by a repair that actually just raised the level of the road rather than having a pothole. You had big ridges all over it. And then they came back a few weeks later and dug all that up and redid it again, and now it's okay. But why did it take two attempts to do it? So, no, I think that the roads on the Isle of Man, whilst they're not the worst in the world, they do stand to be improved an awful lot. And it's just a case of deciding whether or not it's a priority. And Parliament, Tynwald might well decide, no, it's not, that, the occasional bump in the road is preferable to not having enough money for the health service. And I have some sympathy with that. But until we know the figures, we're never going to really know, are we?
So if more does need to be spent on the roads, where does that money come from? Does vehicle excise need to go up?
I don't think it does. No, vehicle excise here is more expensive, certainly on my cars, I think, than if I was in the UK. It used to be the fact that the Isle of Man was cheaper as far as VED was concerned, but that seems to have reversed over recent years. No, I mean, when you consider that, and I don't know the figure offhand, but when you consider that the price of a litre of petrol or diesel is probably only pennies, and yet we're paying, over £1.40 for it now, I think, or £1.38 for it now, the majority of that cost is tax, and they can call it, duty, or they can call it VAT, or it's all tax. And the motorist has no say. We've got champions for all sorts of things in government. We were talking recently, debating about a children's champion, for example. A great thing to have, but there's never really been a champion for motorists, I don't think, and road users. And I think that there needs to be somebody who's looking after our interests.
Could it be you?
Yes, it could. And it doesn't need to be a title. I don't need a position. I don't need a new office or a big staff to run it. But yes, if people want to talk to me about motoring issues and not just private cars, taxi trade, commercial vehicle operators, tractor drivers, people like that, if people want to contact me, then I'm more than happy to try and find clarity.
There was an attempt to update vehicle excise duty last year. How that's all put together, it didn't go through, it got abandoned. Does there need to be a bigger review of how that whole system works?
The best idea that I ever heard, and it came from the Accelerate forums years and years and years ago, is that I very much believe that the user pays is a good principle for most things in life. If you got rid of vehicle excise duty and all the rest of it, and you put it onto the price of fuel instead, it means that those who drive more thirsty vehicles will pay more. Those people who drive more miles will pay more than Mrs. Miggins, who's got a little Nissan Micra that she goes to Tesco's to once a week or whatever. Whereas at the moment, the way that the system is set up is that it doesn't really work, because she might still have to pay hundreds of pounds a year for a vehicle excise duty. So adding it to fuel is, I think, by far the best way. Now, again, I've been told by a couple of ministers, oh, well, we can't do that because we've got some sort of a reciprocal duty deal with the UK. I believe that we can. We keep talking about the fact that the Isle of Man is unique and we make our own laws. Let's make our own law about this. And it's not a perfect solution. You need to bear in mind that people like taxi drivers and truck drivers and operators would need to have some sort of a loophole or some sort of a card, because otherwise we'd all be paying for it through delivery costs, for example.
You're also asking about the cost-benefit analysis of replacing railway bridges for active travel and how that compares with routine highway maintenance as well. Again, we'll start in the same place. Why is it you're bringing that up?
Because I'm looking for fairness on this. The last administration, I think there were a few members of the outgoing House of Keys who were very keen on this active travel strategy, and that's fine. I've got nothing against people who want to cycle or walk. However, it isn't a strategy because it isn't something that's available to the vast majority of people who drive cars. I bought a push bike a couple of years ago because I decided that I needed to get fit. I've been out on it twice. I can get to the end of the road before I fall over in a heap of gasps and breathlessness, because I'm an old guy, and I suspect that an awful lot of people are too old to be getting involved in active travel, and it's just not convenient. A lot of the Isle of Man is rural. People aren't on bush routes necessarily. You can't say to somebody, give up your car, get a push bike instead and go down and do your Tesco shop or your ShopRite shop once a week. It just doesn't work, any of that. Yet the previous administration seemed quite happy to spend money on things like active travel scheme, road plans and painting green lanes and things and stopping motorists from using parts of the road that they'd already paid for. And I just think it's unfair. And whilst, like I say, I'm not having a go at the active travel strategy per se, but have we considered the needs of the few too often over the last 5 years rather than consider the needs of the many? And the many are the motorists who pay the taxes to keep the roads in good order.
The active travel strategy itself, I think, has been going for just over 2 years. Is that a long enough period for us to know if it's been beneficial cost-wise?
Well, when I walk out my front door in the morning to get in the car and I get wet before I can even get in the car, or I get blown off my feet, or any of the other 100 reasons that it's preferable to use a car, I realise that active travel is never going to be something that is going to appeal to me. And it's not just me. I mean, I know that I'm lazy and I don't like physical exercise, but there are an awful lot of people. We keep being told that we've got an ageing population. So let's reflect that in the way that we treat travelling around the island. Active travel is fine if you're young or if you're fit or if you do it for a hobby. That's all great. But it's not an alternative, and we've got to stop thinking that there is this utopian island where everybody walks or cycles everywhere and nobody uses cars.
What would be an alternative then? Would you have preferred to see the railways recommissioned?
Paul Quine, when he was an MHK for far too short a period of time, was very much an advocate of reopening the Peel to Douglas railway line, for example. You see, what's happened is that the island has grown over the years, and we've got big new housing developments, places like Ballawattlewith. Now we've got down south at Ballasalla, for example. There's talk about 350 new houses at Braddon. So all these places, Crosby and all the rest, all these places have been built up, but the infrastructure that connects them all together hasn't been changed. So we're still driving on effectively cart tracks that have been tarmacked, and there's been no real thought given. So everywhere you go, there are log jams during the 2 rush hours every day. And so we do need to consider the overall travel strategy. And like I say, I don't think that active travel is it. So maybe a good rail service between Peel and Douglas would have helped alleviate all the traffic that people get on the Peel Road and complain about.
Now, you're not just asking here about active travel, you've also got the aspect about the routine highway maintenance. What is it you're expecting those two figures, that comparison, what is that going to show you?
I don't know. It is a genuine question. This isn't a sprat to catch a mackerel. This is a genuine question about where government's priorities are in spending on maintenance, infrastructure maintenance.